Hey guys, so last week IndieStone, the developers behind Project Zomboid, put out a post about upcoming features coming in Build 42. There's a lot of stuff here, so let's jump right into it. Before we get into the big stuff, the developers have made a small announcement regarding Build 42.69. Nothing major is coming in the patch, just some new items with 3D models, new discoveries for foraging, and a variety of multiplayer stability fixes. Next, we have changes to fishing and a new mechanic lockpicking coming to the game. While the developers don't know when they will release this yet, they have had their first internal test for the new fishing mechanics. Basically, PZ is looking to make the fishing more robust by having different types of lines, hooks, baits, and catching options, all of which will increase or decrease your chances of catching a certain type of fish. On top of that, the location where you fish, the time of day, weather, and your fishing skill will all play a role into it as well. The devs are also bringing elements of Airtion's lockpicking mod into the game with the intent of having more higher tier loot in the game behind locked containers, doors, chests, gun safes, and a lot more. Different locks will vary in the level of challenge, and some locks may even require different tools to successfully pick. Next, there will be some changes to music and map design. The developers mentioned that Formosa UK is drafting a rework to the action music in the game. The plan is to have the ambient music crossfade to the action music when combat has started instead of just cutting off the music mid-track. They also are planning on adding different intensities to the actions, so subconsciously fighting 20 zombies will be a lot more intense than fighting 5 zombies, at least in terms of the music. Lastly, before we talk about animals in Project Zomboid, the devs are adjusting the map. As of right now, the developers are adding farms to the map to accommodate livestock and other animals in the game. They're also working on the many years later challenge map, and amongst this, they're also working on adding new tiles to pre-existing locations and adding some older and fancier homes to the richer neighborhoods. Okay, now to get into the main stuff the post talked about. As we all know, the devs are working on adding animals to the game, and we just got some big news this week. That being said, it's important to remember that all of this can change at some point, so just keep that in mind. First of all, the developers are adding various farm animals into the game and they're making them mod friendly, and I'll touch on that more in a bit. Some of the animals implemented right now are mainly livestock, so cows, sheep, pigs, and chicken, all of which can be found at various farms around the world, but the devs have also mentioned other animals as well, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Once found, the player can attach a rope to the animal's neck and lead them back to their base. Farm animals would perform a variety of actions once inside their pen, like flap their wings, eat from troughs that the player can construct, sleep, lie down, graze on grass, which then the grass would have to regrow, and so much more. Other behaviors we can see are babies staying by their mothers, and even drinking milk from the udders. Animals will have different growth stages and will progress through these stages realistically, so for instance, a baby calf will take 2 in-game years to grow to full size, but the rate of growth can be changed in sandbox mode. Players can butcher animals, and the bigger the animal is, the more food it will produce for the player. Multiple animals will have different breeds in the game, so for instance, the player can have an Angus cow or a Holstein cow, and the breed will determine a few things like how big the cow gets, the quality of beef, and the quality of milk. Speaking of milk, the player can milk different animals in the game like cows and sheep. If the player milks the animal every day, it will produce more and more milk, but if the udder remains full, the animal can develop medical issues and will produce less milk as a result. The post also speaks about sheep and the fact that you can shear the wool off of sheep as well as milk them. The last major animal the devs talk about in this post are chickens. The player can have hens and roosters, and if they are both present together, the hens will lay eggs that can be collected by the player or left alone to hatch baby chicks. The hens will lay eggs randomly in the pen unless the player constructs a hen house that will be added in build 42. If the player constructs a hen house, the hens will automatically lay their eggs in the building, and besides the convenience of having all your eggs in one place, there's another reason that you want to construct a hen house. If the chickens don't have a hen house to go to or the doors left open, then foxes may come in and kill all your chickens. The last major thing the post talks about in regards to animals is animal breeding, because there really wouldn't be much of a point to add animals if there was no way to get more animals in game, so the developers are adding a new breeding mechanic, and to be honest, this is what excites me most about Build 42. It's not necessarily about the breeding itself, but how the devs are making breeding important to the player. Since all animals in the game will have certain qualities, these qualities can be passed on to their offspring. How the developers word it is that each animal will have 2 alleles for a particular quality or characteristic. For those who don't know or need a reminder, an allele is a group of DNA that corresponds to a characteristic for an organism like their eye color or hair color. The devs are basically implementing this for a whole bunch of characteristics for the animals in game, like their life expectancy, their strength, their quality of milk, their appearance, and so much more. As players level up their respective skills, they will be able to check various attributes of an animal, and they can try to mix and match different animals to breed the best animal for their survival. I think this will add a lot to the end game, especially that some players might try to create a prize bull, as the developers put it. Furthermore, the devs talk about adding in a dominant and recessive genes into the mechanic as well. For those who don't know or need a refresher, a dominant gene is a group of DNA that, if present, will always present with a certain quality or characteristic, and a recessive gene is a group of DNA that will present with different characteristics only if a dominant gene is not also present with it. I will put up a few Mendel diagrams so you can see how this will work and how the developers intend on implementing this, but I won't go into detail because this is not a biology class. But for your understanding, I will explain a little bit. So in this example, you'll have big A and little a. Big A will correspond with the dominant trait, and in this case it will be for brown eyes. Little a will be a recessive trait for blue eyes. If a big A is present anywhere, that particular individual will have brown eyes. If there is no big A and they only have little a's, that particular individual will have blue eyes. Just like in real life, in game, the offspring will receive one of these two genes randomly from each of their parents. I did this little biology recap for a few reasons. First, to highlight how in-depth the developers want to carry this mechanic and how much work they're putting into it. Secondly, because it's important to have this basic understanding if you're trying to get certain characteristics out of your animals. Third, because I think it's really cool. And lastly, as the developers put it, if you do a lot of inbreeding, your animals might have a lot of health problems. So you can't just do the Minecraft thing and create 50 cows from the same 2 or 3 parents. So to combat this, you would have to have what we call genetic diversity. So you will basically have to go to different farms and find different animals that you can breed. Or if you're in a multiplayer server, you can find another player to trade cows with, or even just come up with some type of deal. Now, even though the devs are bringing realism into this mechanic, they're still gamifying it a bit, so it will still be easy for players to learn and understand. That being said, they won't have a panel that shows what different alleles an animal might have, but they are making this mod friendly, so don't be surprised if a mod comes out very soon after Build 42 releases that lets you easily see the different alleles an animal has. The last thing the devs say is that they would like to bring this breeding mechanic over to plants, but if they do so, it definitely would not be with Build 42 when it releases. The last thing I want to do is speculate a little bit. The post nor the developers, to my knowledge, said anything about these, but I want to draw some natural conclusions from the things that we do know about so far. The first thing we can see is a new mechanic to make clothes in the game. Now again, the developers didn't mention this, but I think it's only natural since in Build 42 we will be able to shear sheep, and maybe the quality of clothes or the type of clothes can be based on the player's tailoring level. Next, I think we will see at least one new profession, or possibly what I will call a sub-profession when Build 42 releases. With the addition of animals, it's almost certain that a new skill will be attached to it, and with every new skill there's always at least one profession that enhances that skill. So, in Build 42 we might see a profession called rancher or veterinarian, or we can see the farming profession only be specific for animals, and the current farmer profession name will be changed to something like sharecropper. I mentioned sub-professions, so I'll explain that a little bit here. Instead of adding a whole new profession, the devs can add sub-professions. So for example, if I pick farming for my profession, I may be able to choose whether I want to specialize in animal farming or crop farming. We could also see this with the burglar profession as well when lockpicking comes out. Instead of always having the hotwire skill, the player can choose if they want to be able to hotwire cars or be able to have proficiency in lockpicking. Or we may even see that the burglar only focuses on lockpicking and the hot wheel skill may go to the electrician or the mechanic profession. The last thing is not a speculation, but it is something I wondered about. In the post, there's no mention whether or not cows will attract zombies, and if they do, will the zombies interact with the cows, like will they attack them and eat them? So how well do you have to protect your livestock? It's also unclear whether or not the animals will be able to spread the infection. While this won't matter much for livestock, let's say that the devs add in wolves or bears or something like that, will that animal be able to spread the infection to the player if the animal bites or scratches the player? All of those questions I think are valid, and I would really love to see the answers to that. But there you have it, the first major look into how animals will work in Build 42. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to keep up to date with Project Zomboid news, subscribe, because I will be covering future news of the game. I also have other videos on my channel like challenge runs for different games. Don't forget to leave a like, and as always, have a good one.